what you want, when you want it, where you want it. This is The Mesh.
Brothers in Tech is a weekly podcast focused on personal and home technology, helping provide you, our fellow brothers and sisters in tech, with some information, assistance, and recommendations. This may be one of the more important topics we've actually discussed here on Brothers in Tech, as we all should be thinking about how we're going to tame the digital mess we leave our family following our own demise. In this episode, the Brothers in Tech discuss strategies for managing your digital legacy. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Brothers in Tech here on the Mesh.tv podcast network. My name is Alan Jackson. I am one of two brothers that you will meet in this podcast show episode. The other one being my actual brother in tech, Brian Jackson. Brian, how you doing?
Alan, I am doing well. I'm glad I'm one of the brothers that you're going to introduce today, and we can.
Spoiler alert!
There are two brothers.
That's right. That is it.
That's right.
There are no other brothers.
Don't wait around for the other one. So no, I'm
no
doing
surprise
good.
Brothers coming up anytime soon. It is just Brian. So
yeah, wah, wah, wah. Yeah, I'm doing good, Alan. I'm well. I tell you what, I'm coming into this episode thinking, gosh, I'm just ready to be uplifted about an incredibly positive topic, something that's just going.
Yes.
I mean, this almost could be considered a comedy episode, right? I mean, I think it's borderline kind of uplifting that way, right?
This is going to be an hilarious episode because we're talking about digital legacies.
Which is,
in case you're not clear on that term, that is basically what happens to your tech digital life when you pass away. Who gets it? Who handles it? What's done with it? And Brian, we brought this topic up, when planning this episode. And by the way, this show, Brothers in Tech, Brian and I get together. Sometimes we have guests, sometimes we don't, and we talk about different aspects of technology, but mainly the technology that may affect you on a personal, family, home basis. We don't get into a lot of enterprise business tech. It is truly what you as an individual or a family member kind of experience and use on a regular basis. And we want to be a good resource to people out there trying to get a better handle on technology in their personal life, or maybe they are that go-to IT person, the person that gets the phone calls from other family members on how to do something on the computer or on my new phone. And we just want to be a resource, a brotherhood of people to kind of band together and help us all through these technology hurdles and challenges and opportunities.
Yep.
So what better way to just jump right into a fun subject than talking about, well, then what do we do with our technology when we pass away?
Yep. So we are talking, I mean, let's just be honest. We're talking about death here, right?
Yeah.
This show is about death and
this episode, not this whole show.
Well, that's true.
We don't
That's
talk
true.
about
Yeah.
death
So
on a daily.
this particular
we don't
episode.
talk about death on a per episode basis.
Yeah.
It's really just going to be pretty localized into this episode.
Yeah. No, and I think it actually, you mentioned our purpose has always been, how do we help families, people that are interacting, in the home environment, to be able to, use their digital life a little bit more effectively. And I actually kind of, when we thought about this topic, I thought, this probably could be one of the more important episodes that we have, because everything that we've talking about so far throughout the last couple of years has been, ways of being more efficient with your digital life, maybe use technology a little bit more effectively. We're always talking about new tech, new services, new products. But we haven't really talked about, how do we protect them? We had a few episodes about security, and ways to protect it for yourself, for other people getting it when you don't want it. But what about a situation where you do want other people to get it because you have passed on and you're not there to get it yourself? So I think that this is a good topic. It may not be the most uplifting topic, but it is I think, incredibly important topic for us to talk about. So,
well, absolutely. And I think, and here's the situation for a lot of us. I mean, I know, the age we are, Brian, we're in our, mid to upper 40s.
some
I have
more
a
in the
will.
mid, some in the uppers. Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
some closer to the upper. I have a will. My wife and I have a will, a standard will that we did, I think, pretty early on in our marriage. I mean, I think it's probably been at least 15 years that we created the will. And as I look back and thought about and looked at that will just earlier today, just kind of in preparation, talking about this topic, yeah, there's nothing in my will that has any semblance or connection to my digital life. And we're talking, access to accounts. We're talking access to photo libraries, even access to my computer. Like if I were to die today, I don't know if anybody would be able to get into my computer unless I had some plan in place for them. And if they can't get into my computer, there's so many things there they would not be able to get access to. So, as I look back on it, it's like, I guarantee there's a lot of people in the same situation. You've got a will, and the will has covered the more traditional physical things that you're going to leave behind, heirlooms, collectibles, whatever it may be, property, all that. But I guarantee you, most people have not gone back and added digital legacy elements to their will.
Right.
And that's why it is important. Because there's a lot of people who's so much of their life is hinging now on what they have online.
Yeah.
And
Alan, and my assumption is, and we'll get into kind of all the different types of digital legacy elements, which I think is really helpful for you to think about. But I think most of us, when we think about, my digital, my passwords are safe, or my account is safe. Well, sure. The typical way you think about finances, for example, my retirement account. Well, yes, I've already put a survivor on that. I've already put that if I'm not here, it goes to this person, which kind of protects that. However, you got to think about how many hoops it's going to take to get to that, right? And the fact that you could make that potentially a little bit easier by taking some steps to try to make that process work. But when you start thinking of other things that you may not initially worry about when you're thinking value, you mentioned pictures, right? I mean, if all of my pictures went away, and we obviously everyone has tons of pictures, that is your history, right? I mean, that is your way of kind of documenting history. That's something that has value to people. I would hope it has value to other people when I leave, right? And you'd want to make sure that is accessible from others. And this is something that's been in the news for many, many years, that someone passes away and the spouse isn't able to access their phone, which of course has all the important information. It's long legal battles to be able to do that because nobody's thinking about putting in their will. So I think it's important for us to kind of step back a minute and think, what is it that comprises our digital legacy? So Alan, why don't you help us out a little bit? Give us an idea of some of the depth that we're talking about with your digital legacy. What goes into that?
Yeah. So, because I'll guarantee you again, and I'm making a lot of assumptions, I think, on what people are thinking out there, but only because this is where I was until I spent some more time really thinking about this. Again, the idea of a digital legacy, a lot of people think, well, as long as it's just logins and passwords to different websites, then that's all that matters. Well, there's a lot more. That is part of your digital legacy. If you have login passwords to websites where you have accounts, where you have financial information, where you have anything at all related to you, yes, that is part of your digital legacy for sure. But think about a few other things. What if you had a blog? Okay, well, what if you were a blogger and you had a lot of content you've written and put up online? What's going to be done with that? It may be more than just a login and password need to get it and maintain it. You may actually want to have some ideas of what you'd want to have happen with your blog or something like that if you were to pass away. Maybe you want somebody else to take it on, or you want somebody to shut it down. That's something that you've got to consider. That's part of that digital legacy. Domain names for websites.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there's value there. If you own a website address that has any sense of value to it, that is still something you have to decide what you want to do as part of your legacy if you were to pass away. I own alanjackson.org, which I don't use for anything, but there is a really famous country music singer named Alan Jackson. He may one day start a foundation and decide he wants alanjackson.org. That's kind of valuable, or could be kind of valuable. And I kind of want to make sure if something happened to me that somebody actually knows that it's there and I own it and what to do with it in that situation. Another thing I think a lot of people don't even think about is your presence on online communities or places where maybe you've posted content before. For a lot of people, maybe you don't really think that that's really you need to worry about leaving behind, but there's a lot of people who stake a lot of their personality and a lot of their interest into, different online communities where you've posted content. And it's just thinking about what do you want done with that stuff. I mean, that's again, that's your content, things you created that's only available in a digital space. You pass away, nobody has access to it. It's gone. And, it's out there floating around, but you have no ownership of it or nobody else does. So,
okay, that's actually good, Alan, because I'm making notes here so with any blog that I have in any sort of listserv, I'm going to tell my wife to just go and post underneath each one of them that Brian has left the building, right?
Yeah,
and I just want that everywhere. Brian has left the building.
You know what? When you think about this, podcast episode. So what happens, Brian, to these Brothers in Tech episodes if I'm not here?
Well, I mean, I think the natural thought would be the Smithsonian, but I think that beyond that, I think it's probably important that we recognize the value that they have, and that this particular digital media that we have created, people are probably going to come asking for it. So we probably need to put that in our digital legacy wills.
You can go ahead and assign it some good value to it and make sure people know. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But that is true. I mean, if you own a podcast, make sure you know who kind of what you want to have done with the media and the podcast feed. There's just a lot of things to it. You already mentioned music, photos. I mean, I think that's all that's the more natural digital things. I think.
Yeah, that's what you create, right? The things you have. Mm-hmm.
Your photos, your videos, your music, and even just your documents. If you created documents on your computer, even if it's text documents, spreadsheets that are important information for you, anything at all that you create, I think you want to make sure you have access to or know what you're going to do with it. And then, as I mentioned, accounts. Really, that's going to be the biggest laundry list of things is just accounts that you have online. It doesn't matter if it's an account for eBay where you're selling stuff and you've got stuff listed up there. Maybe you have some dollars built up in some of these accounts that you use, and all of a sudden you're gone. You need to know who can get to it and what should they do with that account when they get to it. Amazon account. I mean, gosh, there's times where I've got a lot of gift card balances or return balances in my Amazon account. Kind of want to make sure somebody knows about that, knows what to do with it if they need to take it over.
Yep.
So really, that's the biggest laundry list is all the just logins, accounts, and what to do there. But I don't want people to forget things like creative content created online, in terms of blog posts, podcast episodes, digital work or art you've created. I mean, all these things are just as valuable or could be just as valuable in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
Now, the social media networks, that's going to take a little more discussion there, Brian. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, all those. The difference with a social media channel or these networks from just content you create is that these networks are not really set up in a way that you can just give somebody else your login and password, and that's all they got to do, because these networks are based off of you personally. Okay, if I'm no longer here, my Facebook page all of a sudden changes in what its value is or how important it is, but it's still something I need to decide what's going to happen as part of that digital legacy with my Facebook page or my Facebook account, my Twitter account, my LinkedIn account. Do I want them shut down? Do I want them transferred in some way to somebody else? I mean, what do I want done with those? These are all things when we talk about digital legacy, these are all things that should be considered.
Yep.
And it is a longer list. And I think a lot of people, myself included, really were thinking about when I started thinking about this topic.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note that each of those social networks, my understanding is they're different in the way they approach this, right? That you have to kind of realize each one, what's the process? Can you decide that in advance? Can you just determine who else has control of this? Is it easy to shut it down later? And I think that we all know that when we've talked about social media before, just shutting something down isn't always an easy thing to do. And when you shut it down, it doesn't necessarily mean that content goes away. There might be two different things here, right? About locking an account versus actually deleting content versus saving content. Google, for example, right? There's so much information that I have on Google, whether it's Google Drive, Google Photos, right? Gmail, all of this. They do have the capability of you going in and downloading your data and saying, go ahead and download every bit of data you have from me, which of course is a little scary because you start to realize they've been tracking a lot of information about me. But those are the things that, well, if you're gone, how do you go about downloading that? Because I remember doing that process actually took a number of different steps. It wasn't just logging in. It was verifying it was me. It was doing two-factor authentication. So I think, part of our tips regarding this process is going to be find out what each one of those services requires so that you can think about it in advance. Are there things you can do now to make things a lot easier for the person that you leave behind, and making sure that's the case. Alan, I wanted to mention one other thing, because you talked about financial accounts, specifically like the things where you buy stuff, or maybe you're selling stuff, or you have gift cards. I also want to kind of remind people the other direction, which is, if you've got utilities that maybe are on auto pay, or you've got, for example, me, I have, I think I pay for Adobe Lightroom that comes out every month. That actually comes out of my Apple account that is separate from my wife's Apple account. So I was just thinking about that today, going, I wonder how long it would be before she knew that was continuing to come out month to month, right? Maybe she'd see it on the checking account, but would she have the ability to be able to go and cancel that easily? And
that's the bigger question here, is that, can somebody go in and manage that account or do something with that account per your wishes? I mean, again, we're talking about something just like a will, that with a will, you have a assortment of assets, and you're saying, this is what I want done with these assets, or here's who I want to have them go to. It's the same exact thing with all those things I listed on a digital legacy. It's what do I want done with them, and who gets them if there's anything to give. Yep. And I think it's important. And I think again, I know I'm guilty of this, and I think a lot of people are in the same boat. Think, well, I just need a list of logins and passwords to all my services. And yes, that will get you a big chunk of the way in this whole process if that's up to date and good. But there's still the question of what to do with them. And what to do with these services, what to do with these accounts, what to do with these balances of things you may have online, what to do with the creative content you've created and you've put up online. So the same thing, you got to decide what to do with them, not just who gets them, but what to do with once that person has it. What are they supposed to do with it, or what could they do with it? So, now, Brian, there's we're not alone in starting to think about this more, and that there's a lot of the bigger companies who are taking some real big strides to create ways to make this easier, or sellable services to do this for you. And we'll get to that in a little bit, but let's maybe talk first. Okay. If you're someone who says, all right, you've listened to us talk for the last 20 minutes about the importance of this. I get it. I understand now. Yes, this is something I need to do. I really don't want to I don't want to invest a lot of money or get into a big service. I think I can do this myself. But what's kind of the low tech way to kind of get this at least going? Okay. What's the low tech way to start creating your digital legacy?
Yeah.
And let's talk about what that could look like for somebody.
Yeah, because I've been thinking a lot about this. Because again, the people that we created this podcast for initially was for those that may not feel as tech savvy initially and would like to have some additional tips, some ideas, some things to think about. And I remember when we did our passwords, I think it was our online security episode many months ago, that we talked a little bit about, there is the low tech way of simply writing down your passwords, right? I mean and I think that same strategy can work here, right? I'm thinking to myself, if I had one, sheet or a database that I was able to create and print out, what would I want on it? Well, I'd want the company or the website or whatever it is that's the location of this digital information. I'd want the access to that, whether it's the passwords or whatnot. And then, as you said, I want the instructions on that. This is our utility. Keep it. Make sure that the credit card gets updated so that you don't get, errors, right? Go in and change. Here's another thing, right? Go in and change the email address so that it comes to you with statements rather than my old one, right? That sort of thing. But I think I would want to know, like, what are the instructions that I should be able to do with that? So which of these things should I be keeping? Which should be shut down right away? That's like, if I'm gone, we don't need the photo editing software anymore, right? That was me.
Right. Yep.
Get rid of it, right? You're paying a service on that. So I think that's one of the low tech things that I'm going to be doing, is making a list, probably putting in our safe that says at least these are the important accounts that are out there, the things that I want to make sure that right away that you have access to, that you know how to look for, and that you assure that you're at least starting the process of getting things under your control, right?
Yeah, that is the number one first step if you're going to go your own kind of do-it-yourself, create your digital legacy to leave behind. Couple caveats with that. I will just say, I agree. I think that's probably the safest, most rudimentary way to do this and to be most comfortable with what you've got in front of you. Is the whole idea of documenting your logins and passwords for websites or services. Rightfully so, these sites are more and more forcing people to update their password on a somewhat regular basis, every 6 months maybe. So that's just a lot to keep up with. So just keep in mind, if you are going to create a master document, printable, easy to distribute document of your logins and passwords, it has to stay up to date. So if you go through and get prompted on your bank account that you need to change your password because it's been a few months and they need you to do a new one, you got to make absolutely sure that you go right to your document that you're keeping up with and you update it there as well, because otherwise it has no value if you're not keeping your passwords and information up to date. So it does take a regular audit and review of that document if you're going to go you're going to document it yourself approach.
Yep.
Now, there's always the danger that if you create a spreadsheet or a digital list of all these logins and passwords, well, that's...
What if you don't have access to that? Right?
yeah, exactly. That's a problem too. Then that's
and that's always been it's always been the interesting thing, right? So I and I can say this because I'm pretty sure my mother-in-law is not listening, but I used to think it was maybe ultra simple of her that she has a book that is on her shelf, and inside that book, on the inside cover, is where she writes down all of her passwords. And then she is very diligent about going and scratching out one of those passwords and updating it whenever she has to update something. But I always thought to myself, like, well, okay, that's a hard copy thing that if that were to get lost or that were to burn in a fire, right, of course, that's easily gone. And now on the flip side, for her, she's like, well, digitally, if I can't access it, right, I don't want to be stuck with that either. So I'd like to have that hard copy. And I do agree that there's a benefit to having. And, for some people, they would say, oh, well, listen, I'm just going to create 5 copies of it and I'll put it everywhere around. Well, that's 5 copies that you have to update. That's also 5 copies that could get stolen. That's going to be 5 copies that have a lot of really sensitive information. So, you got to be careful about this. I mean, we have a small safe. I think, using a safe like all our other documents is probably a helpful thing. Mm-hmm. This is where, as you mentioned, being a little digital savvy is really helpful, in that maybe you say, every 3 months, there's an alert that says, time to update your passwords, right? Time to go to your document and update. Now, is that tedious? And would you give up after a while if you have to go back and do each one of those? Not if you are reminding yourself that every time you have to change your password, maybe start to make a note that, maybe make a list digitally that is just, hey, these are the ones that I've changed. Not that I'm going to write down what they are, but I can go back and look at that later. So I think this is becoming so important because we live through the digital means that we are going to have to take some steps to be a little bit more diligent about it. Alan, you also mentioned, we've been encouraging, when we talked about security before and passwords, we've encouraged that multi-factor authentication, two-factor authentication is something you do want to turn on, right? That's the way to be safe, right? And so for people, just a reminder, that's when the website says, do you want two-factor authentication? It means instead of just logging in and using your username and password, it will then send a code to your phone, or it will send something to I have a Duo, like a security manager that I have to then approve on my watch that says, yep, that's me. Okay, well, realize now that's two factors, which means that's two layers of security, which means that's two layers of security your survivor is going to have to deal with. Okay, so your survivor may have that password, but if they don't have your phone or your watch or your access to your other things in which you as your second authentication, then they're screwed as well. And if they continue to try that, it's going to potentially lock that account down and not have access to it. So make sure you realize when you do have two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication, that's multi-factor that your survivor needs to have access to as well if you want them to access to that account.
Yeah, very, very important. I run into this all the time, and it's not even with people who have passed away. It's just, if I'm helping somebody manage their Google account and they're trying to get logged in on another device, and Google pops up and says, okay, well, to log in, we got your password. That's great. But now we're going to send a code to this particular device that you have to authenticate. And they don't know, they don't have that device anymore, and they never went around getting it updated. It's a problem. And I can't even imagine if you don't have access to some of those other devices or ways of checking those accounts when someone's not here anymore. Yep. That is a real challenge. So yes, you're exactly right. Two-factor authentication on devices is extremely important, and to note and to make sure that you know what that other way of getting access to that account is, and that's going to be available for whoever you leave this stuff behind as well.
Yep.
Good point. So yes, there's a lot of things that you need to, if you're going to go your do-it-yourself route of just, I'm documenting everything, I'm just going to have it all together. It's making sure you're keeping your logins and passwords up to date. You're thorough with the list, and you have instructions. It's not just logins and passwords. It's also instructions of what to do with those accounts. Now, the social media services, social media networks, do need to kind of handle those a little separately, because again, it's not enough just to say, here's my login and password for my Facebook account. You need to kind of decide what's going to happen to your accounts, or if you want anything to happen to your accounts when you're not here. And each social media network has their own process. Like, for example, I'll say with Facebook, you have a choice if you've passed away that you can choose to have your Facebook account memorialized, which means it's put in a status where people know that this person has passed away, and maybe they use it for posting notes and condolences for the rest of the family to see. Or you could you want to have your account shut down. You just like, you know what, just close it out. It's done. I don't need anything on it for anything to be left behind. I'm fine with it just being gone. But either way, you have to kind of make some decisions about what you want to have done with it. And if you do choose to memorialize it, for example, you have to appoint a legacy contact on Facebook. And then they're still going to have to submit a request on your behalf, like after you've passed away, that memorializing it, they have to go into Facebook and request that an account gets deleted. Again, so there's a process. Yep. There's a process with Facebook, and it's not the same on every single social network. So you do need to do a little homework for those networks that are important to you.
Right. Some of them are going to have to show like a death certificate and all of that. There are some things that you have to be prepared to do. Right.
I'll say this. Okay. If you've got a Twitter account that you were just using to read tweets of other people, and you didn't really put up anything that had any real sentimental value to you or something you want to keep up, I mean, is it the worst thing in the world just to kind of let that float out there? No, that's probably fine. If there's nothing on that account that you feel like needs to come down if you're no longer here,
Right.
then it's just going to linger out on the internet for however long but not really have any impact. But I do think things where you have actually created content, posted photos, posted things, you kind of need to make some decisions on those social networks, what you want to have done with those accounts afterwards.
Yep.
Instagram, so for example, Instagram deletes inactive accounts after a certain period of time, like almost automatically. So like if your account goes inactive for a really long time, it's going to delete your account anyway. But you can designate family members and have them request the site to delete your account after you pass away if you choose to. So again, it's just choices to make on each of these. I think evaluating what social networks are important for you to have some action take place when you've passed away, and making sure that you've designated either the legacy person through those accounts of who's going to take it on, and then with some instructions of what to do with those accounts when you're gone as well.
Yep.
That's going to take a little more homework. I'll go ahead and tell you, it's, I know there's a lot of work putting together all the logins and passwords, but reaching out and finding out what to do on each of these social networks is going to be a little more tedious. But once you know the plan for each of those, then you can document that on your same document. You've got your logins and passwords, and that kind of becomes your master plan there.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Alan, can we mention real quick? I know we talked about kind of low-tech ways, but probably importantly, because I'm just thinking to myself, one of the things that Apple has done over the last several years, and I don't know if I've ever asked you about this, but Apple suggests these really challenging passwords. Like when you're creating a password, it'll say, "Oh, can we suggest one?" Incredibly long, detailed password, but it's saying, "Hey, we'll create this one that you'll never remember, but we're going to save it for you as well." Okay, and a concern of mine is that if you agree to that, which of course is very safe, right? You're not using the same password over and over. It's creating a very unique one. That also is something that I don't know, and I hadn't memorized, and I can't put down on paper. So I think it's important that when you do that, maybe this is a good time for, and if you haven't listened to our episode on passwords and security in a while, you may go back and do that, because a password manager could be a really effective way of doing this. And for those that don't know, password managers are, where you can have a service that you're paying for that keeps all of your passwords for every account, right? You input it and you make sure that it can then kind of throw your passwords in, very similar to what Apple does with an iCloud and all of that, or a keychain. But the difference is that you have one password then to get into that account. And that is very easy to then give to a spouse to say, here's that master password that maybe only that one password needs to change every 3 months, like we talked about. And if I can change that one password, have that listed in my safe that says, LastPass or OnePass. Is it OnePass? No, LastPass,
LastPass
one password.
Is one of them.
One password, right? So if I just said, to my survivor, Laura, go to this account, go and log into one password with this master password, you'll have access to all of my passwords. I think that's a really clean way to do it if you're willing to pay for that service, right? If you're someone that has a ton of passwords, you're changing them often, or you have very challenging passwords, which I think is a good thing, that are really hard for you to put down on paper, for the next person to pick up, that may be a really smart use of money. If you feel like you would just want to make it easy for someone to access all of your accounts after you're gone, I think having a password manager could be a really smart way to do it.
Agreed. It's kind of that middle ground. You're not quite low tech. You're kind of still relying on some technology, but it is definitely an easier way of organizing all of that together and making it easier for somebody to get access to all of them in one place. Now, I did want to mention that, we kind of talked about kind of on the do-it-yourself kind of mentality of plotting out your digital legacy. As I mentioned a little earlier, a lot of these bigger tech companies are starting to think about this type of service more and more, and are offering ways to users to help them preserve their digital legacy.
Yeah.
most notably, Google and Apple, kind of using the two big examples here, I know for a fact, have services in place that allow you to go ahead and set up and designate kind of a digital legacy plan for your accounts. For Apple, that means the iCloud account that you may use. The latest version of iOS that's coming out for iPhone and iPad here in the next little bit, version 15.2, has a feature built in where you can go ahead and set up your digital legacy, designate a legacy contact, and or somebody who will have access to your iCloud account if you pass away, and provide them with access to all the content that may be stored on your iCloud account. As long as they still have to show a death certificate proof that you have in fact passed away. But once they've shown that document, they will be given access to your iCloud account, all the content that's on there. Google has a service, similar type of service for all of the Google account they have. So this is great if you're someone who has a lot of your digital life in either Apple's iCloud or Google services at all, or both, like me. My work life is pretty much on Google. My personal stuff is all on iCloud. So yes, I would utilize both services to make sure they were in place. And that's going to cover 90% of my stuff, one of those two services. If I have Google and Apple set up to designate somebody to take on my digital life from those services, that covers a huge swath of my work. So that's great to know that Apple's rolling this out as well now too.
Yeah.
Again, you're still going to need proof of death certificate for that designated person to show. And I think in Apple's case, when you set them up as a digital legacy recipient, they're going to get a very unique, specific access code. They're going to need that code to show in the case of your demise, as well as the death certificate. But once they've shown those two pieces, which they'll be able to submit online to do electronically, then they will be given access to your iCloud account. And that includes your photos, your videos that are stored up on your iCloud account, your email, if you're using iCloud email accounts, what else was there? Access to, I think, media purchased.
I think you get digital media. Yeah, at least.
Yeah, I need to double check on that. I'm not sure about that one, but there's a nice big long list of things you will get access to on the iCloud account once you have that. So Google and Apple are starting to make it a little easier, but my fear, Brian, is that I just think when people hear the announcement from Apple that, now on your iPhone, you can set up a digital legacy and name somebody as a recipient, I'm afraid just a lot of people are going to think that means everything in your digital life is going to be handled for you. And it's not.
Right.
It's just whatever you have in your iCloud account, which may be a lot, but it's not going to share passwords and logins to other websites. It's not going to share other documents you have on your computer that were not on iCloud. I mean, it's not everything. So it's a nice step in the right direction, but you're still going to have to do some work outside of that.
Yep.
So.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think that, big key here is we talked about low tech, make a list, whether that list is exhaustive of everything or whether that list is a way of getting into the main accounts, at least, I think at a minimum, right? Getting someone access to the main accounts that money is coming out of, or that you need access to be able to get to funds, to valuable things. I think it's helpful to make a list on those things. A big topic, or a big tip that you brought up about not only knowing what those accounts are, but knowing what they're supposed to do with those accounts. Make it easy. Mm-hmm. You could have a will that says, "Hey, so and so gets access to this in my estate." But if you really want something done with that thing, right, you need to tell them, because that's another stressor that individual is going to have to deal with, to say, okay, great, I have access to it. What do I do with it? So I think that's smart.
Yeah. True.
Now, as I was looking into some of the tips, there was another one, and this one makes me really nervous, Alan, and I'll tell you why. This one says, make sure you decide who your digital executor is. Okay. Mm. Yeah. Who is the person, right, that's going to kind of be responsible for your digital legacy? Now, normally that's a spouse for us, right? Whoever the survivor is going to be of a relationship. But I'm also a little nervous that, for us, Alan, I think our family, many of them may just say, "Oh, digital, yeah, let's have Alan do it. Let's have Brian do it." Right? That
Right.
that's going to be our inheritance. Alan is going to be, "Hey, I'm going to give
Yep.
Alan my Google account," right? Because that's
Oh,
really worth something, right?
yes.
So I think that recognize who your person is that you trust that can be able to not only have access to those things, but actually be capable of doing something with them, right? I mean, I can imagine as if I was much older and my spouse, I would say, well, here you go. You have access to my digital accounts. But if they're not comfortable, capable, or even, of interest of dealing with the digital world, then that's probably not the best thing to do. And I think the most important part of all of this is at some point, you need to formalize it, right? And Alan, you mentioned that you have a will. I unfortunately do not have a will at all because, again, we don't have kids, so we never really thought that it was necessary for us. But now I'm realizing that it's helpful that when you have that will or you have some sort of written document, that you make sure that you use the language of your digital estate or your digital legacy to be able to say this person gets access to these things or this person can take over these things. Because I think even if you don't have the passwords, this is my assumption, Alan, and I don't know this for a fact, but my assumption is even if you don't have the passwords, even if you don't have some of the secret, codes that are needed to get into some of these, if at least you have a will that then says you're supposed to have access to X, Y, and Z, I think it's going to help you in the process. The process is going to be a lot more difficult, but I think it'll at least help you in the process to be able to say legally, I should have access to these things and then be able to go through the hoops of doing that. So I think that's an important step.
Well, and I'll go one more step further just to say that you're going to see a lot more companies rolling out products and services to kind of take care of a lot of this for you. Some of the ones I've seen that have been kind of the nicer ones, I know some big either investment companies or financial planning companies are setting up, digital vaults for people to use where you can store copies of all that digital important information. And it's just kind of wrapped into all of your other investment accounts and plans so that your manager knows that there's a way to pass that digital vault on to your loved ones in such a way that you can kind of have it managed by somebody else and they know that they're going to take care of it and manage it. Obviously, I mean, you got to have a planner or broker relationship to do that. And there's obviously some, I'm sure, fees involved to do that kind of service, but you can get pretty high level with it and get it really, really planned out. I think we're kind of in that weird middle phase right now, Brian, where just enough people are starting to think about it and work on it and do it, where we're stuck between people just kind of homegrown solutions for documenting things and starting to think about, I may actually want to have professionals help me manage this and do it. So we're kind of in that weird middle phase where I think there's a lot of people that can still do this themselves. But it is going to get more complicated as time goes on. I mean, the more and more we're putting stuff online, the more of this is going to be a lot more work to keep up with.
Right.
And
well, I think there's more to work with. The security is getting more challenging and rightfully so because it's important. So there's interesting balance here, right? As you get more information associated with you digitally, that it's out there, then there's more need for security. As security gets tighter and better, it's going to be harder then for this process to happen. So, but at the same point, I agree with you. There's a lot of things happening where the people are recognizing how much of a hassle it is when this occurs. That I hope that some of that simplicity is coming along, or at least some of that efficiency is coming along. You can certainly help yourself by continuing to follow these steps. Make sure that you write down those things in advance, keep track of them, make sure you have a discussion with your significant other about these things, talk about how to, what are the most important things to do, and go ahead and start to, prepare yourself for that transition should it happen. And I think you'll certainly, your loved one will appreciate it. It's never
absolutely.
a fun thing to do, but it pays off.
When I'll tell you though, in all seriousness, Brian, even just thinking about this subject over the last little bit, and I was prepping for this episode recording, has really got me focused on it more than I ever have been. And that's, if that's the same thing that comes out of this episode, other people listening to it, then great. That's the biggest thing. Is I think it's just the big message to take away from this show is take it. Let's take some time to take it seriously. And, I'm not saying it's as important as maybe your physical or financial assets, but for many of you out there listening, your digital life does have a lot of value to it. And we just need to make sure, we all need to make sure it's being taken care of properly, just like an heirloom, just like a family keepsake, just like a piece of property or a vehicle or anything. We need to know what's going to happen to it afterwards. It's a good thing to be kind of working on and planning for. Sorry to be kind of on a bummer subject, this time, but we also feel like it's pretty important in keeping in that tech knowledge base as well. All right. Well, Brian, if anybody has any thoughts or ideas on, or maybe some new services that are coming up that are kind of helping with this digital legacy planning, we'd love to hear about them and kind of help maybe circle back in a future episode on a kind of a recap of any of these. How can they go about talking to us or getting some information to us?
Yeah, you should drop us an email at info@themesh.tv. That's info@themesh.tv. Just a reminder also, we're on Twitter, where you can kind of send us a note on there, send us a comment on there. Let us know if that's easier for you to kind of share some services that you've come across, some products that you want us to maybe pass along. So I think it's, we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear some ideas. We'd love to be able to pass on some strategies that others could be able to use. So if you have some suggestions, please let us know. And of course, as always, if you have ideas for future topics, maybe some that are a little bit more light in for the future, Alan, so we're not totally depressed afterwards, send those along. So info@themesh.tv.
Yeah, that sounds great. Well, we will be back for another episode soon with another topic on technology, especially for the home, family, personal life. But we hope this information was helpful. Again, contact us or reach out if you have some questions, thoughts, or ideas of ways to improve this subject in the future. And until then, we'll look forward to talking to everybody next time. Take care, everyone. Thanks for your time.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to The Mesh, an online media network of shows and programs ranging from business to arts, sports to entertainment, music to community. All programs are available on the website as well as through iTunes and YouTube. Check us out online at themesh.tv. Discover other network shows and give us feedback on what you just heard.